Thank you, David and Chip, for such an insightful documentary. Really enjoyed these clips, really tease it up, I think, for us to enjoy the entire 3 hours. I'm Gleaves Whitney, as mentioned, and I'm very proud to help host this evening. And I want to just say thank you to our other two hosts who co-hosted this evening. It'd be Michael Walenta at WGVU, and also, I think I've got his name right, Cliff Martin at the Ford School. Thank you so much for being here. And I also have a shout out for Matt McLogan. Matt called me up several months ago, and he's the one who put the event this evening on our radar, and so we were just delighted to be able to host this. What an insightful film. There are just two brief comments I have. I would like to link the foreign policy and PATCO. George Shultz, the Secretary of State during that period, made a very, very interesting comment later. He said that Reagan's decision, his toughness with the PATCO strikers, was the most important foreign policy decision that Reagan made, because it telegraphed to the Soviet leaders that Reagan meant business, that if your word was your bond when you started to negotiate with Reagan. So that was a very important point that Secretary of State Shultz made, linking those two. And the second thing, David, you asked why Reagan, why now? I think on everybody's mind now, something that's certainly been on our minds at the Hauenstein Center is the lack of bipartisan cooperation in Washington and the urgent need to bring back the spirit of this. Now, no one doubts that Reagan had these really strong principles and he could be stubborn with them, but Reagan also had the gift of being able to work with people with whom he disagreed in a good spirit. And there's a wonderful anecdote that goes far to explain the spirit of Ronald Reagan in his autobiography when he talks about an event that he and Nancy hosted a dinner several months after the inauguration. He had recovered from the assassination attempt, and he describes it as a very warm and wonderful evening. Tip O'Neill came over, the Speaker of the House, and Reagan and O'Neill traded their Irish stories that they had learned from their father. He says to the point of exhausting the spouses and the waitstaff and everybody else around them. But Reagan said, at the end of the evening, I knew I had a friend in Tip O'Neill. We had become friends. The next day, Tip O'Neill said something that a Washington Post reporter picked up, criticizing the Economic Recovery Act and some of the spending cuts that Ronald Reagan was recommending. Reagan says he had hurt feelings. He picked up the phone and he called Tip O'Neill across the street. He said, I'm disappointed in what you said. And Tip O'Neill responded, he said, oh, buddy, you got to learn about politics in Washington. Before 6 o'clock, it's politics. We're not necessarily friends before 6 o'clock, but after 6 o'clock, I'll go have a beer with you or a good sip and scotch anywhere you want to go. And so every time Ronald Reagan ran into Tip O'Neill after that, he'd always look at his watch. He'd say, Tip, I think it's 6 o'clock. Well, I also want to tee up, just as the final comment this evening, that on March 7th, our good friends at the Ford Presidential Museum, represented by Elaine Didier in the back there. Elaine, thank you for being here this evening. March 7th, we're going to bring in H.W. Brands to talk about what makes a great president, and what Bill Brands is going to focus on is the presidency of Ronald Reagan. March 7th, 7 o'clock at the Ford Museum. We hope you can be there. Thank you so much for being here this evening.